while we wait for Kate O'Mara, this is Damien Thomas and Martin Stevens. We have a little applause for them. How are you gentlemen finding the show so far?
Mind-blowing.
Amazing.
Yeah, it's quite extraordinary. I mean, I attended a few events. Nothing in America. First time in America to attend an event like this. But this is quite extraordinary. Just the number of people, and amazing the amount of enthusiasm that everyone seems to have for film. And not only that, the amount of knowledge that they have about film, far more than I have. So I'm getting educated.
Yes, and Martin said everything I was going to say. People seem to know more about work that I have done than I do myself. So I'm learning something new every day.
By the way, before I came, it's so long since I was in movies, I actually had to look myself up on Wikipedia to find out what I'd done.
Yeah, I'm still available. So,
and here comes Kate.
This is Kate O'Mara.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
I was just asking these gentlemen, how did they find being at this convention and the people coming up to them? How do you find the people coming up to you? What was your feeling when people came up and appreciated your work?
People have been so charming, so utterly charming and appreciative. I must say I find Americans very polite and lovely, and it's been a great pleasure, but because it's so nice to know that one's work is appreciated, what one tries to do, and that's lovely, and they've been so responsive. I've had a really lovely time so far.
That's a great answer, thank you. I will start with Martin. Village of the Damned, that's a very, very well remembered film.
By the way, it was on television here at 4 o'clock this morning.
Was it really?
I thought I'd get in a little plug there.
For those of you who are awake at 4 a.m. and this
I was, by the way.
I guess it became an iconic film for many reasons. The child of terror. What was, because you were very young, how old were you when?
I was 10 years old. And it's interesting you say that. You say it's a child of terror. Actually, I think you could look at it a different way. Mm-hmm. I think because, you know, the man who plays my father, George Sanders, he's a scientist. He's interested in the potential, the mental capabilities of these children and so on. And you have this conflict between him and the authorities and the politicians and so on, who basically say, if you don't understand it, destroy it. So we kind of understand that philosophy, don't we? And so it's quite interesting because it's bringing up that duality between the two. And so yes, they are a bit scary because they can control people's minds, they can kill people, they can read their minds, they can do a lot of things, they're very powerful, but they're actually not necessarily malevolent. So it's quite interesting if you look at it in that way. Yes, they do bump off a few people, and that's unfortunate, but...
what did you, being 10 years old, what did you draw from your mind or draw from to portray that role in such a way that you did?
Well, there were two things. I mean, I was given the script to read. I read the whole script through with my mum. And, I mean, I loved the part. And of course, the 10-year-old kid, I loved the part because here's a kid that's got power over adults. I mean, what can be more appealing to a kid than that? So I really loved the part. also, I mean, this is a very personal thing, but I mean, my dad died 3 weeks before I made that film. And so I was, clearly, I was in quite a sort of special place psychologically when I made that movie. And I see it, every time I see the movie now, I can see in my eyes a little sadness, which comes through the part of David. And part of that sadness was clearly because I just lost my dad.
So those interesting things that you drew upon for that. Now, I'm going to jump around here. Kate, you've appeared in many films, many British television, episodic television, but two of the things you're most remembered for were your Hammer films, Vampire Lovers and Horror of Frankenstein. Are there any Hammer film fans here? There's a room full of them. Do you have a particular remembrance of from either one of those two films?
Well, the great thing I think I found, it was like being in a repertory company. It was a very happy company. Those two movies were made consecutively up at the same studios with quite a lot of the same members of the cast, and so we became like a team, and we got to know each other very well, and they were extremely enjoyable to make. One had no idea that they were going to become cult movies, of course, one had no idea at all, but they were very nice people in the cast, and we all had a very good time indeed. Wish we could make some more, because they're really enjoyable to make, you know. I don't know why, because they can be quite gruesome. but somehow, I think one can sort of let rip in them a bit. You can sort of go the whole hog, because you know it's a sort of preposterous situation. I mean, I've never come across a vampire myself, so you know, you know that it's possibly not really terribly real, and that doesn't mean to say you don't take it seriously, because of course you do, because as an actress you want to make people believe. If people believe what you're doing, then they'll enjoy it. It's no good, you know, you can't send it up. You mustn't send it up. If you have that, I don't know if you have that expression over here. You can't parody it. You have to take it absolutely seriously. And there's something very enjoyable about trying to tread that fine line between belief and disbelief. And that's, I think, what makes it very enjoyable. But it was mainly because of my fellow cast members who were a joy to work with, quite honestly.
It's a wonderful answer. I have something I wanted to get back to, but I'll do that in a moment. I wanted to ask Damien, your experience working on a Hammer film. What can you recollect about that?
Well, I was a raw beginner. I'd never seen the inside of a film studio until I had the good fortune, as it seemed then, to be cast in this role. So I was very keen to appear relaxed and sophisticated and experienced, to look as if I knew all there was to know, which was absolutely not the case. I was tripping over cables and felt very self-conscious at the beginning. You know, once you got into it, and Kate was saying that the team were supportive and friendly, and it's I think things have changed, haven't they, since those days. These were very low-budget films. No one, I can assure you, was being paid an awful lot of money, least of all the actors. And I was certainly explained that this was a big opportunity for me. Maybe I should be paid to be in it. But nonetheless, it was. You'd break for lunch and you'd go into the Pinewood Club, and there'd be all these amazing stars, you know, Roger Moore, others, so you had to appear just as calm as they were, and as relaxed. You had a right to be there. I always felt a bit like an interloper. The whole thing was a kind of dream that was going to be shattered any minute. But it didn't work out that way. And as Kate said, one didn't think for a moment that a film of that, not so much a film of that kind. I loved Hammer films when I was a kid. They had everything that we were not allowed to watch, pretty much, in them. And I didn't think at the time that this would be a film that I would be still talking about all these years later. A long time ago. It was made in 1971.
That's Twins of Evil, by the way. If I forgot to mention, I'm sorry, I did. And you were portraying Count Karnstein.
Correct.
Or is it Karnstein?
That's the word. Yeah, is it Steen or Stein? I think I had it.
Because a lot of the Hammer films at the time, they were supposed to be taking place in Bavaria or Transylvania or wherever. So the Steins and Steens, you know, a lot. Your role is also supposed to be this very sexual male character, because your presence over these other vampiresses, actually vampire women. How did you prepare for that, or you just went into it based on your interpretation of what the character was supposed to be like?
There's a scene, isn't there, when he conjures up Mircalla, his great grandmother, and it was the inexorable Katia Wyatt. So that made it quite easy to play the scene with her. And I think it's the scene which gets the only laugh in the whole film. There are two moments, but this was one. It was when she reaches back at some crucial moment in the proceedings and takes hold of a lit candle behind. I don't know if those who've seen it recall that moment, but I think it is one of the. It always gets a laugh whenever I've seen screenings of a film. That is you could expect a laugh there, understandably. It's ridiculous.
Martin, I had a question I wanted to ask. When Village of the Damned opened, did you go see it? As a young child, did you see the film when it opened theatrically?
Yeah, I did see Village of the Damned because I think it was a slightly lower rating at the time. But interestingly, the film I made after that, which was The Innocents, a year later, with Deborah Garr and Michael Redgrave, that was an X-rated film. And they had invited me to the London premiere. And then about a week before, the film studio phoned up and said, sorry, there's a problem, you can't come. You're underage. A small detail that I'd actually made the film didn't wash, And actually, I didn't get to see that film for another 4 years. And the only way I got to see it, I finally got in to see it. I snuck into a cinema in Chelsea in London when I was 15 years old. I was still underage. And with a friend of mine, he sort of smuggled me in. And I finally saw it 4 years later. That's how strict they were. Yeah.
Did you get the feeling at the time that you were possibly being groomed as the young demonic child?
Well,
between the innocence and...
Yeah. Well, the thing is, I made a lot of movies.
Oh, yes, I know.
Yeah, and it's interesting that the ones that have kind of stuck in people's imaginations are, if you like, the more scary ones. And I was in a Hammer movie as well. I was in The Witches. But I did make, I was in, romantic movies and comedies and, the full range. But it's just these ones are stuck in people's imaginations for some reason. So there seems to be an association that I was a scary child. I really wasn't. I was very scary.
Okay. You were, I guess one could presume you were being groomed as Hammer's sex bomb with your appearances in their pictures.
Yes, actually I was. But it was not a path I particularly wanted to follow. I mean, I'm essentially a theatre actress, always have been, and my career has been largely in the theatre. And I didn't want to go down that path, but there was a moment, I was offered a contract by Hammer, and I turned it down. And I couldn't afford to turn it down, but I felt I had to, because I thought that if I stuck with Hammer, that would be the end of my classical career or legitimate career, whatever you like to call it. And I'm sure I was right, because Ingrid Pitt, who did sign a contract with them, really, she was a very good actress, and she never actually had the chance to show her potential, because she was labelled as, you know, a Hammer girl, you know, whatever. And so I think I made the right decision. But interestingly enough, when I was offered that contract, at the same time, I was offered an episode of Doctor Who, way back then, and I couldn't do it because I'd already committed to Hammer. So, and I didn't appear in Doctor Who until the 80s, 1985, which is when I came to America to do Dynasty. And but I could have had the opportunity to play a scientist in 1970, but I missed it. But then I caught up with it again in the 80s. It's extraordinary the twists and turns one's career takes. You have to be quite determined if you want to follow a certain path, I think.
I heard that you do not do these type of things, these events often. So you have people coming up to you this week and who are fans of Dynasty,
Yep.
fans of Doctor Who, and we know they're a rabid bunch, and Hammer.
Yeah.
So you have all three of these groups now.
Yeah.
And some of them are independent of one another. The Dynasty, you know, they probably don't know too much about Hammer, or they're not really into it. So it's probably really interesting.
It's nice. It's nice to be so diverse, because you meet a lot of different people and some people see me in absolutely fabulous, or you know, things like that, and have loved that, and all sorts of other things. I've done so much, but it's very nice to have different people talking about different things, and they come up and they say, "Ah, the Rani," they say, from Doctor Who, the villainess, you know. And others say, "Oh, you know, absolutely fab." It's very nice to have done so many different things.
And you three have done stage work. Damien has done a ton of stage work, I've noticed over the years. Between stage and film, all three of you, what is your favorite role, personal favorite role? And it doesn't have to be something that anyone's overly familiar with here. But I'm curious, I like to ask people what their favorite role is as an actor or actress.
Cleopatra, I've played it 3 times, it's wonderful.
On the stage?
Yeah.
Difficult one. I think we did at the York Theatre Royal. We did a production, a revival of Webster's Devil's Law Case, which very rarely performed. Romelio in that it was fantastic to be reviving something which hadn't been seen on the stage for all that time, and it was well worth the effort. Huge part, and the fact that I managed to learn all the lines alone I felt was a huge achievement. Of course, it's not just about learning lines. I had a little extra something with the CDs. Yeah, I think that's. I mean, I don't know. I think we all would agree that this what we did last, really, hopefully, is something that we enjoyed as much as anything. I'm trying to answer your question because really, it's not. I'm never going to find a really good answer for it.
I recently played Marlene Dietrich on the stage with a fair amount of success, I have to say, and I'll probably do it again. That was enormously satisfying, because one was trying to live up to people's expectations of Marlene, whom I'd seen in the theatre and practically met, but not quite, and I found that very satisfying. However, there's other people here. Sorry.
Martin.
I mean, I think I did enjoy the whole of my career, but I think probably I have to say playing Miles in The Innocents was the most satisfying. Because I can watch that movie now and I can be I feel very dissociated. It was 53 years ago. I can feel very dissociated from that person. But I can actually feel very moved by watching this child doing that performance, much more so than maybe many other of the parts that I did. So I think I would probably opt for Miles. But also, as Damien says, mind you, my last movie was actually a Hammer movie, so I don't know if that was necessarily my favourite. But I would say the Miles, yeah. And it was such a beautiful film. And also Jack Clayton to work with. He was the director, Jack Clayton, and he was the most delightful director to work for. He was both director and producer. This is crucial. It meant he didn't have the money men hanging over him. And it meant he had freedom. He had freedom of time. We could spend a whole morning just discussing a difficulty. Because he was dealing with two little children, 11 years old, 9 years old. Very demanding parts, really demanding parts. And he wanted to coax out the best performances he possibly could from these kids. And so he had all the patience and gentleness and subtlety. To work with that was really a privilege.
Great answer. You stopped acting. You went on to another career. Would you like to mention something about that?
Well, at the age of 2, when I got into the business, it's not exactly self-determining. I had a mum, and my mum loved the theatre, and it was she, of course, who got me into the business, and my sisters. So I didn't choose to get into the business, and it was also decided that by the time I was 13, I would go to boarding school, I go to university, and I'd train in something else, and it was just like a decision, and I was a very pliant, compliant child, and I'd just go along with it, So come 13, I was refusing parts. I did do 2 more. The Battle of the Villa Fiorita and The Witches, the Hammer production. But then, by that time I was taking A-levels, I was doing university entrance, and you can't start taking terms off school if you're getting to that higher level of education. So I trained for 7 years. 7 years, God. 7 years, I trained for 7 years, and I became an architect. And I've been an architect ever since, and I still practice.
Do you ever think about going back into films? Do you have plans?
I don't think I'm good enough.
Sure.
I tell you one thing I would love to do. I've only recently started. I've kind of hidden under a sort of stone for the last 40 years, and I've assumed this part of my life is completely gone and forgotten. And it's only a couple of years ago that I started getting some calls to come and do some public appearances. I thought, oh, okay, I'll go along. They are very, very interesting. But one thing I actually would love to do, anyone of you who knows any agents here in America, is I'd love to do a speaking tour in America. That is something I would love to do, to talk about some of the films I make. So, if you know anyone, please get in touch with me.
Martin is available.